Tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, thank you for giving us the space for this discussion today. For those who don't know us, my name is Megan and I'm the chair of the Labour Canterbury Women's Branch, and this is Bebe, our secretary. The vision of our branch is that all women can fully participate in all aspects of the Labour Party, and our mission is to welcome, support and celebrate the women of Canterbury and their contribution to the party. Since this is a representation review, we are here today to talk to you about representation. The LEA requires a review of representation arrangements every 6 years to make sure they're still fair and provide effective representation for communities. Your engagement document notes that your primary consideration is to provide for effective representation of communities of interest. This is what we would like to talk to you about today. Look around. Do you think you are a good representation of your communities? Women are 50.1% of the Christchurch population, but are only 30% of councillors. This is not a fair representation. So, how do we solve this?
We're here to say that the lack of good representation at council is a systemic problem that requires an organisational response. We can't blame individual candidates or councillors for the lack of fair representation. The solution must lie with the organisation. How can this be achieved? What can we do? Or what can you do? Well, for example, at the last election, the Labour Party made a commitment to have a caucus that comprises 50% women, or, put another way, no more than 50% men. At the 2020 election, this was achieved. Women are 55% of the Labour caucus, so it is possible if there's the will to do it. The council needs to make this same commitment. We don't have a lot of time to talk here about how this might happen, what the mechanisms that can be used to achieve fair representation, but what we're here to say is that it has to happen. Council also needs to address other significant lack of diversities, which we're not going to talk about because we're here to represent women, but people of colour, LGBTQIA+, disability, age. For example, the population in Christchurch aged 25 to 29 is 7% of the population. I don't think it has fair representation at this table. Oh, still 29. Well, that's pretty good then. 50% of the New Zealand population is under 30. 50%. So the review here we see is tinkering with the boundaries. We understand that that is your goal in this representation review. That's what it states in the review document. That really we've had the previous go round we had quite a big review and a big change. So this time we want to make a smaller change. We think this is inadequate when we have such unfair representation. It needs to be addressed and we can't wait any longer. We've been waiting a long time.
We just had a submission earlier on that it suggested a mechanism for doing that.
Great.
And that was instead of having representatives from individual wards, but having representatives from across the ward, so the community board area. Can you put that, are you able to put that slide back up from the earlier submission? I mean, it's just because you've said you don't know how to do it. We've had a submission from somebody who suggested... Can
I speak to that?
Yep.
Just for a moment. So I had a look at statistics over time, and what I would say is that it may be the case that, there's the... Thanks, Chrissy. I'm not sure about this. What I would say is that representation of women over time fluctuates, and so it's hard to see a pattern of representation when you compare voting per board area or at large versus voting per ward area more specifically, and the correlation of that and women being elected. So for example, you can see that in 2010 46% of elected members were women, but they were elected at large. And this election we had 31%, and in between we've got some fluctuation around a quarter. So it's hard to see a pattern over time when you.
The only
when you
time
look
we've had individual representation was the last one, which dropped to 15%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I thought it was an interesting point, and
It is.
but I asked you to comment on it, and
I've
you
done
have.
so.
And I had hands up over here. James was the first.
Kia ora kōrua. Look, I have tremendous sympathy for what you're trying to achieve, but I'm really keen to know, you talked about there are mechanisms, but you didn't have time to go into them. Can you give us some sense of what they are? Before you do that, it's just that I think that this is, I don't know that this is the body that can do that. And I better say before you reply, that I don't in principle agree with central government, like political parties, being involved at this level. I think that this should be as independent as we can get. So my question is, how do we make it better from your perspective? What are the mechanisms?
Maybe a simple quota. I don't know how it works because I don't know how voting works well enough to be able to know. I feel like there are better heads than mine that understand this, and that I'm happy to talk to those people, but I don't understand exactly how that works. How I've seen it work is by a simple quota.
Yeah, but we can't impose
No,
a
I know
quota.
that. But you can
in the
advocate for something
But in the representation
behalf of your
review, which is
people.
what we're discussing
Yes.
today, we can't do that. So, Sam.
Cool, thank you very much for coming in. So just in terms of that, I'm just trying to understand, it probably touches a wee bit on what James had asked. So it's got the New Zealand Labour Party, that's not the People's Choice Group. You're not speaking on behalf of the People's Choice Group today, are you?
We're speaking on behalf of the Canterbury Women's branch of the New
Labour
Zealand Party.
Yeah, cool, okay. So have you raised it with the Labour Party? The 50% thing at local government level? They're undertaking a big review at the moment. In terms of, I'm just wondering whether you'd looked at that as another avenue.
I don't think that that's a fair question either.
Which I'm not going to answer.
I'm
trying to get people focused on
the
our
issue.
job. Our job is the representation review.
I'd like to hear the answer to that.
Oh, no, look, I don't care really whether you want to
Oh,
hear an
thank
answer.
Well, let
you.
me
Thank-
answer
thanks,
that.
Lee.
It's not relevant to the conversation we're having now.
It's not relevant to our discussion
It is
today.
entirely relevant to the conversation here today.
Excuse me, could I just have some order, please? I would like to get back to questions. Anne?
Thank you. So I was pleased that you talked not just about the fact of representation of women, but also of other diverse groups. And you talked about the fact that it was a systemic problem. Sorry. So what do you mean by that?
It means it's at an organisational level. It's the way we do things rather than individually. I can say, I'm a woman, I should put my hand up. I'm 29, I can be counted as a statistic to say I'm represented. But actually it's the mechanisms of how people select themselves for election, how elections happen. It's the mechanisms by which you get here that are the problem.
Sarah?
Which obviously isn't a council issue, I understand, but this is the forum I have.
Yeah, Sarah.
Thanks so much. I just going back to Chrissy's slide. So we used to have about 50-50, sometimes just slightly over percentage of women around the council table here at council, with the same system normally generally about council and elections and all of those kind of things, except for the one difference that has changed, which is going to single council awards. Do you see anything else in the system that might have changed that has taken us from that high percentage level down to where we are now?
Well, what changed between last time and this time to have such a significant difference?
No, last time we only had, last term of council we only had 25% female. Now we've got 33, but before that it was up at the 50s.
It seems to fluctuate over time and I don't understand that.
Yeah. But
The other way round.
The other way around.
We dropped to 15% when we only had single council awards.
No, we dropped to 4 out of 16, which is 25%. Oh, candidates, yeah. So we had around the table though,
Oh,
we had
right.
25%,
Okay.
and now we've got 33, but we were up at the 50s.
Right.
And I just, if you're saying it's the systematic change, what else has changed about the system? Some of, that definitely plays into some of it.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. And I had Jake.
nice soft one to finish off. So what role do you see in terms of, what role do you think different political groupings have in terms of meeting this target? You know, you've got People's Choice, Independent Citizens, the Greens are at about 50-50 now. What kind of, we've got a little bit further to go, obviously. The Nats.
So People's Choice has made a commitment to gender diversity.
I'm sorry, Leanne, Jake's question's relevant, but mine's ruled out of order. Like, I'm sorry, but...
Sorry, I didn't hear the question, sorry.
I'll repeat.
No, not if you're playing games, so...
Ask a different question, Jake.
No, it's all right. We've come to the end of questions, so thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for raising the issue. I think the issue is important, and it does need to be raised. Thank you. Viviana Zanetti from the Phillipstown Community Centre Charitable Trust.